Okay, so my name is Jeff Branch. I grew up in Louisiana. Most of my childhood educational experience was in a mainstream setting. There were no interpreters back then. The resources that they had available were a little different back then as opposed to now. I'm talking about like the 1970s, 1976, 1978 to be more exact. They only had some small amount of interpreters available in specific areas. So I had to get by reading lips, watching the teacher closely, or the reading materials that they had available I could look over and try to follow along in class. Plus my mother was a big help too. Then my parents got divorced, and I moved in with my mom in New Orleans, while my father lived in Lafayette, which is about a separation of 3 hours. For 7th and 8th grade, I went to school in New Orleans. I was happy, but it was still kind of frustrating. Signing was barely permitted. I got through it okay because the communication was a lot better than where I grew up and went to elementary school, but I wasn't going to complain about it. I mean, it could have been better. So when I finished that, my parents were trying to figure out what was next for me, what was the plan. And they decided that through some recommendation of friends, there was a school in Washington, D.C. called MSSDD, or MSDD. I wasn't keen on going all the way out to Washington, D.C., but my mom said it would probably be the best opportunity for me. I could build networking, connections with people, and it was probably the best place for me. We all figured that I'd be going to Gallaudet afterwards, so that program seemed to have the most compatible educational tools I needed to prepare me for Gallaudet. Plus, living in DC and Gallaudet being in DC, that was also a benefit. So I worked up the nerve to go, even though I was really just not feeling it. I was nervous. It was awkward. So we decided to go to MSDD, excuse me, with the contingency plan that if I didn't like it, I could move back a year later. My experiences were actually really positive. I was able to have direct communication as opposed to indirect communication through an interpreter talking to other people. It was a great place that you could build your group discussion, direct communication, discuss all different kinds of different things that I wasn't able to do in the past. So that place was able to really help me a lot, acquire the skills and learn the stuff that I needed to know. It was a really rich experience for me. It helped build my self-confidence, my self-esteem. I really grew up there and matured. So when I finally graduated, I went to Gallaudet. It was pretty similar experience there. The learning was intense. I was able to be more independent. So then I met you. I was a senior, really my second year senior. I still was there because I minored in one area and needed to take some extra classes to get the degree. And I didn't want to leave Gallaudet. I had grown so accustomed and acclimated to the environment and the experiences, I didn't want to leave that. Now it was time to face the real world and go into reality and be a big grown-up adult. So then I met her, and then 2 years later I left. Really 1 year and a half, right? In 1 year and a half. So then a year, that following Christmas, I finished. Break was over, and I went back in May to graduate. June. Graduated, and then I was all done. And I went to work for CSD. I just want to backtrack a little bit here. I did the internship at CSD. So I really enjoyed working there, and they told me to go ahead and get my degree and come back. They encouraged me to go get it. So I went back to school, finished one semester in the fall. It was the fall and winter. So I started working in January with CSD. And then I went back to Washington, D.C. to graduate with my class. And then I came back to CSD, continued working there for the last 5 years.